Shit just went down at the Mises Institute. The ANCAP headquarters. The legendary Hans Hoppe has been removed from the Mises Institute as a senior distinguished fellow. In response to this article, which I have read when it came out, well, I read it on like the 27th. In response to that article, Professor Hoppe has been removed as a distinguished senior fellow with the Ludwig von Mises Institute, as indicated in the following email exchange. Hoppe was appointed senior fellow early in his association with the Mises Institute, which began when he moved to the U.S. to study with Rothbard in 1985. I note that it is somewhat odd for this note to come from two non-academic executive directors instead of the chairman Lou Rockwell or Joe Salerno, its academic vice president. It is also odd to view the designation as some kind of status or award that can be revoked when one is displeased with the other recipient. The designation was a recognition of his body of works and ideas, which has not changed. As Judy and Chad said, in fact, we will continue to host your past articles, books, and lectures on Mises.org. The Mises Institute has now lost its most important scholar, Rothbard's intimate associate, partner, and friend, and student for the last decade of his life. The only other former MI senior fellows I know to whom something like this has happened are Walter Block, whose pro-war and anti-Rothbardian views was so egregious that association with him could not be tolerated anymore by the MI. And speaking of Walter Block, I want to make a Google forum. If you're an anarcho-capitalist, click into the description down below, and I want to do a Google form of how you feel about Hoppe being removed and Walter Block being removed from the Mises Institute. The Walter Block removal is somewhat old news, but I thought it'd be fun to make a. I was actually going to do a video, something similar like that with Walter Block and get your guys' opinions with a Google forum, but I think I'll combine two videos in one. And then this article is written by Stefan Kinsella, and he talks about how he had to disassociate from the Mises Institute down here. Let's read some of this article for what the hell is going on. On the 25th of March, my close personal association with the Mises Institute goes back more than 40 years to 1985, only 3 years after the Institute's founding. In the course of the years, I have given dozens upon dozens of lectures. I have been awarded its I don't know what that word is, prize in the Rothbard Medal. For a decade, I served as an editor of its Journal of Libertarian Studies. I am the Mises Institute only long-standing distinguished senior fellow. In any functioning organization, the standard solution to avoid internal conflicts or frictions is that the president prevails and that all subordinate officers comply with his orders. The president, once elected, must have the authority to decide on all matters. He may choose to delegate some of his powers, but in principle his decision must be final. And the board of the organization has the duty to back the president and relieve him of his duties only in case of manifested malfeasance, fraud, or treachery, but not because of some mere difference of vision or opinion between him and the other staff on the account of some dissatisfaction, unhappiness, or complaint. But this has not been the setup for the Mises Institute. Instead of a unity of leadership, the MI has institutionalized a duality of leadership that was inevitably bound to result in irresolvable conflict. On the one hand, there was the president, Tom DiLorenzo, and on the other hand, there was the vice president of academic affairs, Joe Salerno. Normally, this would have made DiLorenzo Salerno's superior. But while DiLorenzo, qua president, was to attend board meetings, he was not also a board member. All the while, Salerno has been appointed as a permanent board member and as such was de facto materially the hierarchical superior of any president, whoever that might be. Salerno, qua permanent board member, was placed in a position that allowed him to defy challenge and overcome virtually any sitting president. Next, to dig deeper into this apparent pool of corruption, I turn to Ryan McMaken, editor-in-chief of the Mises Institute website. Notwithstanding the fact that the Mises Institute has announced 2026 as the year of Rothbard, there have been, and still to this day, has been no mention or acknowledgement of of our book by the Institute. Only a tweet over 2 weeks later by the Mises Institute scholar, that black woman, however you pronounce her name. I offered McMaken my above linked introduction for publication at the Mises Institute, or the Mises Wire, and this is what happened. First, nothing. Then I followed up with this email. Ryan, several days ago I submitted the following article to be published at Mises Wire. As you know, I am the only long-standing distinguished senior fellow at the MI, and I am generally recognized as Murray Rothbard's most prominent student and intellectual heir. Still, I have not heard anything back from you. I, and not just I, are curious to know, is your decision to ignore me and show no willingness to publish my article, or are you under orders not to do so? McMaken came first back with this. Thanks for the follow-up. I see your earlier email went to the spam folder. I'll have a look at your submission today. Strange enough that the email of a distinguished senior fellow should land in the spam folder, but hardly surprising any more than was McMaken's following quick decision. Good afternoon. Thank you for your submission. But we are going to pass on this. The primary reason is that it is so heavily focused on Rothbard's work as a libertarian movement strategist and movement issues in general, with very little about Rothbard's work as an economist. Mises.org has generally steered clear of movement content, allowing LRC, as with the old RRR, to be more the publication that covers political coalition building or issues with the libertarian movement. We have been working to better draw this distinction between movement, strategy, publications, and Mises.org. Regards, Ryan McMaken. In response, I only briefly remarked, uh, I am sure that is also the reason why the MI does not even recognize the entire book that we published in honor of Rothbard on March 2nd, while the MI, with a staff of about 30, did not accomplish more than to send out a fundraising letter on that day. I take your response as confirmation that you act under orders. It should be noted that McMaken's reason given for the rejection of my article was a bald-faced lie. Dozens upon dozens of articles published on the MI site were not restricted to the discussion of purely economic matters. Practically none of the articles written by David Gordon or Wanjiro were instances, not to speak about the various pieces by some Connor O'Keefe. More importantly, the very man, Murray Rothbard, was most emphatically not a narrow-minded economist, but an interdisciplinary scholar interested in and familiar with the widest range of subjects. The excuse given for the rejection, then, is just silly, most likely fabricated under the orders of the higher-up. It's kind of got a point, though. I don't consider myself a Hoppian, so a lot of my disagreement with Hoppe is intellectual, but he's got a point there. He's got a point there. I can't lie. Now, this is some tea. The likely cause of this is apparent deficiency. All three previous MI presidents, Doug French, Jeff Dice, and Tom DiLorenzo, all of whom contributed to the Rothbard, whatever that is, have unanimously described Salerno as lazy and unproductive, and an attitude that naturally affects and spreads also among the entire Institute staff. As for the rest of the board, it should be first noted that the real board consists of an inner board of 5 permanent or subscriber members. These are the board members exercising true control of the organization. Next to Lou, the inner board includes, most problematically, Joe Salerno, Peter Klein, professor at Baylor University, but also on the MI payroll as a so-called senior academic advisor and Salerno sidekick. And then there is Lou's sister and his sister-in-law, whose son and daughter-in-law are Institute employees. The other board members appear to have no real power and are mostly window dressing. since the inner board members can exercise an ultimate veto in that they can remove any other non-subscribed board member, as we saw with Judge. Oh, they removed him. That's fun. Judge Napolitano. I know him. The outside board members include Ron Paul, John Denson, Don Prince, and three low-profile donor businessmen. Those guys. So De Soto and Javier Milei are in cahoots. And as we now know in development, that Javier Milei has allied himself with the fascist U.S. federal government and Israel. Milei is completely compromised, and there's nothing redeeming about him anymore. That Joe Salerno, who very well know what Murray Rothbard thought about the neocons, about Zionism in Israel, and who also knew quite well about the actual Malay and about De Soto's close association with him, did so nonetheless came as a shock and represents no less than why an open betrayal of Rothbard's and Rockwell's legacy. Why, I have no clear answer and must speculate. Was Salerno himself a secret Malayist? Although he has always strictly denied this in earlier conversations that we had on the topic? Or did he intend to use De Soto to gain direct access to Malay and replicate what the German Mises Institute had done already before, to sell out, forget about fundamental principles, and invite Malay to Auburn to receive some prize as to gain more popularity and attract some previously inaccessible donor class? Is the MI become the next example of what its former president Doug French has described in a recent book published under uh, the auspice the auspice of the Property of Freedom Society, a movement turned into a racket? In any case, there are ominous signs on the horizon. So, though Bishop said, I think there are valid and honest debates that can be had on the structural issue, but it's not new. The Mises Institute is a very unique organization with a very unique mission. My response would simply be that if you compare the MI to other organizations, particular in the libertarian space, I think it's easy to argue it's had the least amount of fluctuations in mission, message, production, etc. He goes on to say, does it limit who would want to be CEO of the MI? Probably. But the number of people who could be CEO of the MI is already a tiny pool, and I would personally be concerned about a MI president who can't get along with someone like Joe Salerno. Unfortunately, that means George Selgin won't be our next president. There are definitely ways that honest differences can fester into petty personal grudges. The libertarian movement is a history of those. But I don't think that's the case in this instance, and the fact that this became a public spat is unfortunate and really sad, particularly as a fan of Hoppe's works. The worst part is that 2026, I think, is shaping up as one of the most productive years MI has had in recent years. Tons of events, two important books, major improvements to the site, a great research conference, and it's unfortunate to have this distracted from by online drama. Well, I'm kind of contributing to it. But this is the game we choose to play as very online libertarians. About Di Lorenzo, Tho Bishop said, I'm not going to speak to the specifics of that situation, but Di Lorenzo is still a senior fellow, and we still promote his works. And this is, though, about Walter Block. I will always have a soft spot for Walter, but I understand the decision, how hurt he was by it. I think there were opportunities for MI to continue to publish his works without the senior fellowship title, particularly in the JLS, but I think that became harder with the reaction from the personalities involved. He has a recent article, Iran war, which I think was even worse than his Gaza take. So I have a feeling that the tensions will not go away. It was a matter of when, not if. I have, about Walter Block. It's really hard to hate him because he's such a lovable guy, but I do believe he's completely lost it with the issue in Israel and Gaza, and now on Iran. I feel like he's completely lost it, with all due respect. Now, it's I don't really have strong opinions for either way in this situation, except for one really strong opinion. The Mises Institute needs to denounce Javier Milei immediately for being a fascist fraud. I'm confident in that opinion. In my initial impression of this situation unfolding, I have the feeling that I want to side with Hans Hoppe on this one. But honestly, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what's going on. I'm just giving you guys the tea. I just hope the best for everyone. I love what the Mises Institute has done and what they're continuing to do. But if they go full Malay support, if they fully back Malay, I can't stand by the Mises Institute. The future is teeming with excitement, for better or for worse. I wonder what this situation will lead into and what it will affect us as a movement going forward. There's a lot of strong feelings going on right now. A lot of strong feelings. Let's have a discussion in the comment section down below. Give me my engagement up, because the next video I'm going to be releasing part 2 of Notes on Process and Reality, and I don't think a lot of people are going to watch that. This is going to be sort of like my engagement video. Anyways, have a good day.